Hi, I'm Alian, and I am once again experimenting with microalgae. Today, I am completing the second half of the biomass testing process. So, last week, I talked about how I need to, now that my experiment is done, measure the amount of algae that was in my bioreactor the whole time. And to do that, I need to figure out the dry weight biomass of the algae. Basically, how much they weigh if I take away all the water. And to do that, last week I looked at how I could use a centrifuge to condense the algae down and get rid of most of the water. And today I'm going to be finishing up that process by drying it in an oven and then weighing them. And to do that, I went to the same lab I got the centrifuge at, and this is how that went. Before I could even go to the lab, I had to actually get some samples from my bioreactors, which I stored in the fridge so that the algae wouldn't grow or anything while I was waiting. I took 100 milliliters from each bioreactor so that I get an accurate sample that I could then extrapolate to the entire size of the bioreactor. Then, I took these vials over to the lab, and the first thing I did when I got there was walk in and turn on the centrifuge. Just like I did last week, I needed to centrifuge the algae, applying a force of over 3,000 times the force of Earth's gravity to push the algae down to the bottom of the tube so that I could get rid of the most of the water on the top. After I turned that on, I set up the rest of the lab space so that I could measure the biomass in my oven. When the centrifuge was done after 10 minutes, the algae had condensed really nicely down to the bottom of the tube. And this allowed me to siphon off most of the water off the top, pretty much 90% of it, leaving only about 2 to 5 milliliters left on the bottom. What I had at the end was a really concentrated amount of microalgae that had most of the water removed, which would make it really easy to dry. The next step was first to homogenize the algae and get that really dark color you can see, and then extract that and put it onto a petri dish, which was just a surface I could put into the oven so that the algae could be dried safely. Then I turned on the oven, which happened to be an old toaster oven actually, up to 80 degrees Celsius, which is the optimal temperature to bake essentially the microalgae at to get rid of all the water. I turned on the oven, and for a bit everything was going fine, but I ran into a problem. I had forgotten to check the melting point of these petri dishes. And what happened is that while they were in the oven, they started melting and got really warped. Just like this. They went from that perfect circle to this awkward shape that was dropping the microalgae into the oven. And that couldn't be happening. So I had to repeat the test. This time I used a glass vial, which has a much higher melting point and could store the algae much better in the oven. So I took new samples from my bioreactors, went back to the lab, centrifuged them again, dewatered them again, and then put them into these glass vials, which successfully was able to dry them. I kept them at that 80 degrees Celsius and got rid of all the water, and was then able to weigh them on a very precise scale. Before I put the algae in, I had actually pre-weighed my glass vials. And then, when the algae had been fully dried, gotten rid of all the water, I was able to put them back on the scale with the algae in them this time. And then I could subtract off that original weight and figure out the weight of the algae. And it turned out that in all three vials, the weight of the algae was very close to about 1 milligram. In fact, you can see the values that I got right here. These results were super good. Having all the numbers really close together means that my process is working, because between the bioreactors, there's consistency in the biomass collection. And what that tells me is that when I run my actual experiment, the biomass collection process will work and will actually give me the results I need, which is really fantastic. And that's it. Biomass collection is quite literally the last step of the experiment. Round 1 is complete. With any luck, next vlog I will be on to round 2 of the experiment, which is the actual part of the experiment where I'm going to be testing different concentrations of nitrate and phosphate. In round 1, it was just a control group to see, can I replicate results across 3 bioreactors? Now, I've seen pretty well that I can. And now I can test the different nitrate and phosphate concentrations that microalgae would experience in an actual wastewater treatment plant. So, round 2 is going to be starting next week. I myself am super excited. I hope you are super excited as well. And if you're just as excited as I am, subscribe down below to stay tuned, and I will see you in the next one.